Lemongate, one of the best-known fan theories to date. There are numerous posts and videos on the subject, so I won't spend much time going over the premise of the original question. In broad strokes, Daenerys Targaryen frequently thinks back to her time spent at the house with the red door, a simpler time, where she played barefoot with other children and had a lemon tree growing outside her window. She believes that the house was in Braavos, but as countless others have already pointed out, lemon trees do not grow in Braavos.
Throughout the story, that lemon trees do not grow in Braavos.
That lemon trees cannot grow on Braavos.
Lemons don't grow in Braavos.
So if we accept that the house with the red door was not in Braavos, that raises additional questions. Where was the house actually located? And why does Dany think she was in Braavos if she was in fact somewhere else? While there are multiple places lemon trees grow, we will be focusing exclusively on Dorne. This idea has been explored before, but I have additional evidence that has not been highlighted on any major forums that I could find. First, we see Prince Doran at the Water Gardens from Areo-Hota's point of view. We learn it is an idyllic place full of fruit and children at play. And later we learn that the Water Gardens were built for the Princess Daenerys, that she opened them to noble children and later the small folk after she came to Dorne from King's Landing. Of course, Doran was describing a previous Daenerys, Daeron's sister, who married Meryn Martell. But during my first read of Feast, I thought the author was talking about the Daenerys from our story, and I don't think this is a coincidence. But just because the Water Gardens were built for another Daenerys doesn't mean our Dany lived there. I mean, that's obvious. So what other text supports this theory? Well, first, we're told that Dany and her brother Viserys were smuggled out of Dragonstone by Sir Willem Darry and then sailed to Braavos. I believe this is true. Daenerys was born very shortly after her father Aerys died, so she would have been a newborn during the escape from Dragonstone. Unless she has some kind of mutant memory powers, she does not remember this journey herself. She likely doesn't have many concrete memories from before the age of 5. That seems to be the average age where people's memories begin. Incidentally, she was 5 when Willem Darry died, an event that Daenerys associates with being evicted from the house with the red door. So we can assume that Dany's memories from before Willem Darry's death are either memories of things she was told or vague inclinations and images. Since we can't trust Dany's account, let's try to square up what she may have been told with other things we know about her childhood and travel in general. We see another connection between traveling to Braavos and Dorne in Clash. Tyrion sends Myrcella to Dorne via Braavos. He is afraid that she will be captured and either killed or held for ransom, so he takes great care to ensure that she is on a fast ship that stops off in Braavos before sailing to Dorne. Tyrion is coordinating travel for a princess from Blackwater Bay to Dorne and specifically sends her through Braavos because it is the safest route. It's possible that Darry had the same idea. Sailing directly from Dragonstone to Dorne would be obvious to anyone watching, but Braavos, being one of the largest ports in the Free Cities, is a good place to throw trackers off the trail. It is possible that Darry did smuggle the children out of Dragonstone, sailed to Braavos, then took another ship to Dorne. Later, when recounting the story of their escape to Dany, either Willem Darry or Viserys would have told her about that initial voyage, fleeing Dragonstone and sailing to Braavos. Viserys was a child himself, and while Willem Darry was kind, he was also an old man and a soldier. It wouldn't have occurred to either of them that they might have to tell Dany that they didn't stay in Braavos after sailing there. Or, even more likely, she might have overheard the first part of the story being recounted and missed the second part where they left Braavos for Dorne. The next connection to Braavos that we see is the betrothal between Arianne and Viserys, witnessed by the Sea Lord of Braavos. For our purposes, we're going to assume that the signature wasn't forged, although that is absolutely a possibility. When Quentyn presents Dany with the marriage pact, she assumes it was signed during the time that she lived in the house with the red door, but that's based purely on the Sea Lord's signature, not any specific memories of the signing taking place. Daenerys might be conflating two memories. It's possible that she lived in Dorne until she was 4 or 5, and then later Oberyn escorted the children to Braavos after Willem Darry died. Or it's possible that Oberyn met them in Braavos and escorted them to Dorne when they first fled Dragonstone. So with our two pieces of logistics out of the way, let's take a look at the textual suggestion that first made me assume that Daenerys once lived at the Water Gardens. In the Princess and the Tower chapter of Feast, Doran reminds Arianne of the Water Gardens again when he tells her about the marriage pact between herself and Viserys. He says, quote, "You used to ride the shoulders of an older girl, a tall girl with wispy yellow hair. Jane Fowler or her sister Jenelyn." It had been years since Arianne had thought of that. Oh, and Fryn. Her father was a smith. Her hair was brown. Garren was my favorite, though. When I rode Garren, no one could defeat us, not even Nym. And that green-haired Tyrashi girl was the Archon's daughter. I was to have sent you to Tyrosh in her place. You would have served the Archon and met with your betrothed in secret. There is a lot of information here, but let's see what we can break down. We know the identities of 3 of the girls mentioned. The 2 yellow-haired Ironwood sisters are friends with Quentyn growing up, and Garren stays close to Arianne, so we can be reasonably certain of their identities. But Fryn and the Tyrashi girl are a little more mysterious. Could one of them have been Daenerys? By now, we know that George likes to show us bonus details or foreshadow future events using juxtaposition and parallels to in-world tales and histories. We know it's common for Targaryens in hiding to disguise their hair. Egg shaves his head, and young Griff dyes his hair blue. We know that brown and green hair dyes can both be brought to Westeros. Sansa dyes her hair brown while she's disguised as Elaine Stone, and one of Wyman Manderly's granddaughters dyes her hair green. Arianne refers to the brown-haired girl Fryn by name and calls her, quote, the blacksmith's daughter, seemingly familiar with the blacksmith. We know that Willem Darry was older and in poor health and would not have done a great job posing as a blacksmith. So it's possible that Fryn was Daenerys, but highly unlikely. That leaves us with the green-haired girl. Now let's highlight that Doran seems to interrupt Arianne before she can expound about the green-haired girl. He is filling her in on the parts of the story that she needs to know, but she has just recently tried to stage a coup. He doesn't trust her entirely. He doesn't need Arianne to know that Daenerys and Viserys had been right there in the Water Gardens. But Mira, you might ask, if Dany was at the Water Gardens when Darry died, why did Doran allow the children to be evicted and the house to be robbed? Fortunately, I have some answers. First, it would have been noticeable if Doran or Oberyn were seen visiting their house on a regular basis. And it sounds like the time of Darry's death to the time of the children being evicted and then the time of the house being robbed all happened in rapid succession. So Darry died, the children were evicted, the house was robbed, the children are discovered shortly afterwards and brought to Doran and Oberyn's attention. They had people watching the house. But as Littlefinger demonstrates at the end of the first book, spies are not going to rush in and rescue children from a fight and risk being discovered. So if all of this is true, how and why did Dany get to Essos? The Martell brothers decide it would be safer for the children to be in the Free Cities, where Oberyn had many connections. He was sent to Oldtown and then Lys in 274 after killing Lord Ironwood. He traveled throughout the Free Cities for 4 to 6 years and was back in Westeros by 281 because he attended the tourney in Harrenhal. His whereabouts were unknown during Robert's Rebellion, and he seldom left Dorne after the war. But we know that Oberyn brokered the betrothal between Arianne and Viserys. We also have text that supports this idea. Immediately after the conversation about the Water Gardens, Doran tells Arianne that when she was 14, he wanted to send her to Tyrosh, which would have been about 289, the same year that Willem Darry died. So Doran wanted to send Arianne to Tyrosh with Dany and Viserys, but Arianne's mother forbade it. Doran tells Arianne that her mother objected because she didn't want to lose another child now that Quentyn was being fostered. But she threatened to kill herself. Either she was highly dramatic, or the stakes were higher than Doran is letting on. If she knew of the danger, she would not have wanted her daughter essentially going into exile with an impoverished child king. So instead, Oberyn arranged an escort for Dany and Viserys to the Free Cities without Arianne. Perhaps on the Cinnamon Wind. If you're interested in more theories about Oberyn Martell or A Song of Ice and Fire in general, please do hit the subscribe button. We'd love to see you back.